Women's Soccer Review Podcast with Dwayne Rollins and Jonathan Tannenwald on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to another episode of the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network. I'm Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer at my home studio once again. Dwayne Rollins is otherwise occupied today, can't be with us, unfortunately. You might hear in the background that Mother Nature is very occupied because there's a thunderstorm passing through Philadelphia as we're recording this. Kevin Laramie, our producer, is with us in Montreal, and our guest is one of my favorite people in women's soccer. I know I say that all the time, but it really is true. With our guest today, Anne Peterson of the Associated Press, who's based in Portland, Oregon, covers the U.S. women's team, the NWSL, MLS, Pac-12 sports, all manner of other things from out there. Anne, it has taken us far too long to have you on the show. I'm very happy you're here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You know, we haven't had a show in a little while because there hasn't been much to talk about, but now we have some actual news. In the NWSL, the word first came out of France a few days ago, and then this week, as we're recording today is Tuesday, and the word came out, I believe, on Sunday night and Monday from the Salt Lake Tribune that the Utah Royals are lining up signing Sarah Buhati, the French national team goalkeeper, and Jennifer Marozsan, the star playmaker of Germany. They both play their club soccer for Lyon. Their contracts are expiring at the end of what was going to be the current European season, and maybe who knows how that's going to work. And Annie, there are a lot of caveats with this. The deals aren't done yet. You know, who knows what's going to happen with immigration from Europe. Who knows when the NWSL season is going to play. Sarah Buhati said on her Twitter and Instagram she hadn't signed anywhere yet. Jennifer Marozsan said on her Instagram that she bought a dog. This is clearly not done yet, but oh boy, if it gets done, this is one of the biggest deals in NWSL history, I think.
Well, it's, you know, excuse me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of the result of the new player rules and the player signing rules that the NWSL put into place at the end of last season, beginning of this season. But it's too early to speculate on these things because there's a freeze on transactions in the NWSL while all of this is going on. So I'm guessing that this is going to make the Utah Royals the team to watch this year.
I mean, they're certainly going to be up there, and you know, Buhati is fairly well known, I think, to U.S. women's soccer fans at this point, because the U.S. has played France so many times, and because a few of us, and yes, I'm one of these people, and I have been for a while, have pointed out every time Buhati makes some kind of glaring game-costing mistake in net. Marozsan, as great as she is it possible, Annie, that U.S. fans don't really know the full extent of how good she is just because when the U.S. has played Germany, they haven't really seen Marozsan at her full strength?
Well, yes. You know, she was hurt during the World Cup, so we didn't get to see much of her at all last summer in France. From what I remember, she was hurt even before play started, if I'm not mistaken. But she's a fantastic player, and I was actually kind of bummed that I didn't get to see her live last year in France because I have to say she's one of my favorite players.
And I'm looking it up now. I know she played in the 2016 Olympics when Germany won the gold, and the U.S. obviously lost to Sweden, so never crossed paths with Germany there.
Yes.
She has played against...
She scored the deciding goal in the Olympic final.
She has not scored against the U.S. since 2012, believe it or not.
Huh, interesting.
At least from what I can tell. I'm not sure. You might remember this. Did she play at the World Cup in 2015?
Oh, that's a good question. She was named to the squad, I remember. That's a really good question.
I'm going to look it up while we're on the line.
Okay.
It's and I've already heard some of the wisecracks about how good Utah's defense is going to be or not. But this is going to be a team potentially with what? Kristen Press, Jennifer Marajan, Vero Boquette, Diana Matheson, Callie O'Hara. That's a lot of firepower.
Yeah, it's going to definitely make up for the loss of Becky Sauerbrunn to the Thorns in the offseason. But yeah, I mean, I think that the Royals have seen this opportunity that they have under the current salary rules and have really seized on it. I'm kind of surprised, since both of them were, players for Lyon, that there wasn't a kind of handshake with the Reign over some of those players that had decided to maybe leave that team, leave the parent team.
And I would have called shenanigans immediately if that had happened, as I'm sure a number of us would have. I found the answer on Marajan. She did play at the 2015 World Cup, but she was a 78th minute substitute coming in against the United States.
Oh, okay.
Which is why U.S. fans might not have seen a ton of her. And I was traveling with the U.S. team, so I didn't get to watch as many Germany games as I might have otherwise. So I'll take the hit on that. We should get a little more into the money side of it. You mentioned the allocation money part of it, and that is definitely that's definitely a factor here. It seems I've heard, and I don't know how public the numbers are, but I've heard that the Royals are sitting on a pretty fat pile of allocation money right now. So they might, look, I don't know how much money Marajan was making at Lyon. I would imagine it was quite a bit. But if they're willing to come over here and take a little bit of the pay cut, I'm not sure it's going to be a huge pay cut for them to come over here. And here's why I think so. The baseline number that I'm working off of is a story that L'Equipe did last summer on the salaries of the French women's national team players.
Okay.
And in France, as in other countries in Europe, they report the salaries by month. And, generally in European football, we don't hear a ton about players' salaries. We only hear about transfer fees.
Correct.
So the Sarah Buhati's salary in the 2018-19 season at Lyon was 12,000 euros gross a month, which, give or take, you do the straight math on 12 months, and I don't know how that works. But let's say it is 12 months, so it's 144,000 euros, which is around $160,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's doable for an NWSL team. And I would assume Marajan made more than that. Wendy Renard was the highest paid player. She and Amandine Henry both made 29,000 euros a month at Lyon. I'd figure that Marajan is closer to that number than to Buhati's, given her stature. But, $160,000 a year in the NWSL for a foreign player, if you have, as I said, what seems to be a big pile of allocation for money which you're sitting on, is not impossible.
Do you know the highest paid foreign player in the NWSL? Is it Marta? And do we know how much she makes?
Well, I don't think we know how much she makes, because I don't know that we know how much anybody makes. Yael Averbuch probably knows that, who's the head of the NWSL Players Association. Marta's always been an odd duck, hasn't she been, in terms of how her salary has been taken care of, and making sure in the many ways that it's been done over the years that she's playing in the United States. You don't know what Henri made over here, do you? In Portland?
No, I have no idea.
Because I would think that's a comparison. whatever they were lining up to, the Thorns have been lining up to pay Kadidiadu Diani, if she's coming, I would imagine that wouldn't be too far off what Buhati would make. And Diani only made 8,000 euros a month at PSG. That's certainly doable for a
definitely. So
for an NWSL team.
So the way I understand it is that teams can buy up to 300,000 in allocation money, correct? And then use that for player salaries above and beyond the league minimums and the salary cap. Is that how I'm reading that?
I'm going to have to go. If you have the 300,000 number in front of you, I'll take your word for it. I don't. I didn't go look that up. I should have before we came on the air.
Okay, and that would be above and beyond the salary cap that is already in place.
Right.
So basically, theoretically, and I'm not saying this is what has happened, the Royals maxed out on allocation money with 300,000 and maybe split it between those two players.
Something like that. And look,
and $150,000 a year would be, a pretty good salary for a professional player.
Plus a housing allowance, maybe.
Yeah.
And that helps too.
Yeah.
And I don't know very much of anything at all about them off the field, except to say, being a little more of the Instagram world than I used to be, Annie, that they do seem, they're teammates in Lyon. They're obviously close friends. If they're coming as a package deal, potentially going to be roommates over here, I don't know. This is doable, it seems, if the Royals have really loaded up the war chest. But I'm blown away by it most of all, because if you'd said to me even a year ago, Jennifer Marajan is going to be playing in the NWSL in 2020, I wouldn't have asked you how. I would have said, you got to be kidding me.
Right. But I mean, that was the whole reason behind the salary structure, rejiggering the salary structure to be able to hold on to players like Sam Kerr and attract top talent from Europe.
Well, if they get it done, and the reporter in Salt Lake City, Alex Vehar, I know pretty well, as Annie, I think you do too. He's got some good sources over there.
Yep, he knows what he's doing.
I should note though, and this is a matter of public record. It's not blowing anybody's cover. It's been in the news that the Greater Real Salt Lake organization has furloughed some people amid everything that's going on. One of the people who they furloughed is the Royals PR person, which is bad on its face to furlough anybody. It's doubly bad to furlough team PR people when you need to be getting the word out about your team in any way, shape, and form you possibly can right now. And triply bad when that team is about to swing one of the biggest foreign signing deals in NWSL history. So that's my soapbox for the day.
Right.
What are the Thorns up to these days?
Although I'm on a conference call with RSL later this week on Thursday with Giuseppe Rossi.
I saw that. I'm tempted, because he's from New Jersey. I'm tempted, we can talk about that on Soccer Today, Kevin, down the line, Giuseppe Rossi. Let me just say real quick, I've been watching American soccer for a long time. Some of us still have scars about him, and I'm going to be very interested to see him talk. I want to ask you about the Thorns, Annie. What are they up to at the moment?
Well, I actually spoke last week to Morgan Weaver. I did a story on the NWSL not opening their season. Usually what I do about this time of year is I do little player or little team capsules and a season preview, so to speak, that talks about, usually I do a 5 things format, like here are 5 things that you need to pay attention to in advance of the NWSL season. And, you know, this season there was lots to talk about. There was Lisa Baird, the new commissioner. There was the new TV deal. There was this new salary. What kind of impact that this rejiggering of salaries was going to have. The national team players, the Olympic thing, the Olympic absences, meaning that certain players were going to get more time. But of course, obviously, that's not happening because there is no season. So I talked to Morgan Weaver about how, being a rookie and having kind of a Cinderella type of experience in the College Cup playoffs and how Washington State went all the way to the Final Four. And I talked to her about having her season be put on hold. So it's kind of sad for those players that were looking forward to their first professional year. The Thorns also got Sophia Smith from Stanford with the number 1 pick. So they were going to have some firepower, and they were definitely going to have some firepower in the absence of the national team players while they were at the Olympics. But right now, it's funny, we talked on a Zoom call to Becky Sauerbrunn last week. I think you were on it. And they were getting ready to have a Zoom call with Meghan Klingenberg, who was going to teach them how to make vegan pasta. So that's kind of what's going on with the Thorns right now, which is not much. The Timbers and Thorns gave all the players exercise equipment that didn't have it. So these younger NWSL players who are maybe living in apartments, provided by the team, and didn't have access to exercise equipment or had like a gym in their building that now they can't use because of the pandemic, were all sent like exercise bikes and different things. So that's what they're doing. Apparently they're talking about, the team is talking team-wide a couple of times a week, and the players are reaching out to, the team is reaching out to individual players to make sure that, it's all good and that they're following certain training protocols. The question, that I have now is how much time will these players need if there is a season? And that's a big if at this point. But what kind of training camp will these players, not only in the NWSL, but MLS, need to really ramp up for a season at this point? Most of the MLS players are saying that they think they'll need at least 2 weeks. And so I'm guessing it's probably the same for the NWSL.
I wonder this, too, about, 2 weeks heading into what? Because Lisa Baird, the commissioner of the NWSL, has said late June is the target to start playing. And I wonder, can this league play behind closed doors? Because the teams are reliant on, a lot of them on ticket revenue, which they're not going to have, clearly, for a while. And I don't know how much latitude they have to go out and get another television deal for the games that are not in CBS's inventory. And I should probably ask around at some point. But it just does make me wonder, because if they can't, they're a little stuck.
Well, I'm interested. Are teams that have greater season ticket fan bases like the Thorns in better shape than, say, the Chicago Red Stars, who, although the Chicago Red Stars did vastly increase their season ticket holder base, I don't know if that's going to have any impact on how financially stable some of these clubs are going to be.
I'll give you one, the Washington Spirit, which we're going to go into, Audi Field 5 times this year.
Yeah.
And when the time comes, whenever it may be, that the gates are opened again. Look, there is nothing in all of women's soccer like going to a Portland Thorns game. When the stands are full and loud and everything else. But the stands are not going to be full for a while. And when the gates are open again, what is the mood out there? Are people going to want to go?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's Portland. So people are rabid about soccer, both the Thorns and the Timbers. And I think there's a great enthusiasm for being able to attend live games this season. Doubting that's going to happen. I'm already thinking that it's going to be empty stadium games, which calls into question what is the media's role going to be in those games? Will the media be able to cover those games
Not
live?
sitting 6 feet from each other, that's for sure, in those press boxes.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, and I hate to say it, the soccer media has been decimated so much even before the pandemic that getting a spot 6 feet apart from each other in the Thorns or the MLS press box is not going to be a problem, unfortunately. So many of the Oregonian not having a soccer beat writer anymore, and a lot of the local media having to make serious cutbacks means that it's kind of me and Caitlin when she covers MLS freelancing for the Oregonian.
Murray, because there are two of them, to be clear.
Yeah,
Caitlin Murray, both of them in fact have been on this show over time.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. So Caitlin Murray and then the folks from Stumptown Footy, and maybe a TV person or two, and a Spanish language reporter. But that's pretty much it anymore in the press box at Providence Park, which is sad. It's truly sad, but it's just where the industry is at right now, and probably sadly there will be bigger cuts going on in the near future.
And that, folks, is for the best soccer city in the United States.
Exactly. It's sad. It's really sad. I fight all the time for soccer coverage for the AP. So I go to every game whether I'm being paid to be there or not, and it's shocking to me, and it's sad.
Well, let's go under the hood here on that for just a minute before we go to our next subject, to explain a little bit to the listeners of what the Associated Press is, for those who don't know. Every single newspaper, television, radio station, and news radio station at least, and a great number of news websites in the United States would not be able to exist if the Associated Press did not exist, because their reporters are writing stories from Washington and New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and Des Moines, Iowa, and all of these other places where local newspapers like mine don't have the money to send writers all the time, don't have the staffing to have photographers when teams play on the road. It is vital. It is crucial. I have made any number of phone calls in my life, in my 16 years at the Inquirer, in my many jobs, to the AP photo desk in New York, asking if they are going to have photos of this soccer event or that. And not half the time anymore. Used to be, I was told, well, nobody asked. And the people on the end of the line were genuinely nice, and they thanked me for asking. And sometimes they'd manage to rustle something up. You never know. But it's vital. And the role that Annie plays in the AP, along with, and I know quite a few people who work for the AP in the U.S. and around the world, the role that Anne plays is joined only by one or two other people in the whole of the U.S. at the AP in fighting for soccer. There are not that many others. And we are all fortunate that people like Ron Blum and Greg Beecham and I guess Tim Booth would make a three in Seattle.
Tim Booth, yeah, for sure.
We're all very fortunate that they're there and doing the work that they are, because heaven knows if you weren't, we would be miles and miles worse for it. And even if it's something as simple as I was about to say when you pick up your local paper, but Annie, nobody does that anymore except for me.
I do.
You do, good. Okay, somebody else does.
I do.
And Kevin, where you are, it's the Canadian press instead of the AP. But if you were, for example, to pick up a newspaper and turn to this page of the sports section that has all the box scores and schedules and things like that, your wire service does that, folks. That's where it comes from. And it's vital. It really is. And so now we'll come out of the weeds, or at least one section of the weeds, and go into another section of the weeds, which is this report that FIFPro, the Global Players Union,
right,
whose women's division is headed by our dear friend Amanda Vandervoort, issued recently. It said the coronavirus pandemic could be a huge setback to the growth of women's football, to which FIFA came along a couple of days later and said it is not cutting its promised $1 billion investment into women's football between now and 2022. I was on TalkSport Radio in the UK actually a couple of days ago. They asked me to come on and talk about this a little bit. And I said, I am not as worried about the United States as I am the rest of the world, because in the United States, the women's club teams are not quite so directly tied to the fortunes of the men's clubs teams as the way they are in England and France and Germany and Mexico and other places. The benefit of the tie, obviously, and is that you can go and say on a given day that you're going to watch Chelsea play Manchester City, or Club America play against Chivas, or Paris Saint-Germain play against Lyon. The downside is the situation that some of these clubs and teams may find themselves in, where in order to save the cash cow that is the men's team, the women's team is going to get affected here.
Yeah, well, we already saw a glimpse of what the future might mean for women's pro clubs with the announcement last week that a team in Colombia was cutting its men's team salaries by 50%, but completely cutting all the salaries for its women's team. So we're already seeing the results of the financial impact that the pandemic is going to have, especially in these countries where women's soccer is still emerging, like South America, like Africa. And that's a shame, because there were so many gains made following the success of the Women's World Cup. A lot of teams recognized, a lot of federations recognized that there was value in women's football, and that, it seems obvious to all of us who cover women's football, but I think that federations realize that women's football is an untapped kind of financial market that they can that they can draw on, whereas like men's soccer might be a little bit saturated. Women's soccer is growing, so there's a financial benefit to having a women's soccer team. However, that said, the women's football still needs a vast amount of support, especially financial, across the globe. And FIFA's commitment they increased what they were going to spend on women's football by $500 million to bring the total to $1 billion, heading into the 2023 World Cup, wherever that might be. So the fact that they have committed to still maintaining that level of financial support is significant, and it means a lot, especially to the smaller federations and federations for countries that are still kind of developing the women's game. Like you said, the NWSL is likely not to be hurt by this, although I have to say that last week, when MLS announced that they were looking at salary cuts, it kind of made me a little bit nervous for the NWSL and what was going to happen there. But the thing about the report yesterday in The Guardian is that soccer had already FIFA specifically had already spoken about maintaining certain levels of funding in existing programs, including things like FIFA Forward and stuff like that. So the surprise that in a statement that FIFA sent to me this morning, they said that the funding, the $1 billion in funding has already been committed across the board to certain programs. And so at this point, there's no drawing it back. It's already committed. They said, I can read you, they said, quote, in line with the FIFA women's football strategy and FIFA's long-term vision for the development of women's football, this funding will be invested into a range of areas in the women's game, including competitions, capacity building, development programs, governance and leadership, professionalization, and technical programs. We can confirm that this funding has already been committed by FIFA and will not be impacted by the current COVID-19 crisis. The statement went on to say, we can also confirm that FIFA is currently working on possibilities to provide assistance to the football community around the world, including women's football, after making a comprehensive assessment of the financial impact this pandemic will have on football. This follows a video that Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, sent out to member associations about 2 weeks ago, where he pointed out that FIFA has done an incredible, quote unquote, job in boosting its financial reserves. And the financial reserves now sit at $2.7 something billion. And so FIFA is made a pledge to the member associations saying that it was FIFA's duty to take its financial standing and ensure that football comes out of this in a better place than it is now. So FIFA is already committed to making sure that it's cash cows, the men's game, but also the women's game are going to be fine following the pandemic. Now, a lot of it depends on what the federations or what the member associations in FIFA do, A, with the funding, and B, if in a lot of developing nations, a lot of times women get overlooked or the financial resources go to the men's team, and likely that will continue. But, the money that has been already given to women's programs within that FIFA plan has already been committed.
I don't know if Kevin has a breaking news sound effect, but Anne, your story literally moved on the wire while we've been recording the show.
Look at that.
I will not read all the AP slug garbled terminology except to say that it is now on my screen.
Oh, good.
So I think a couple of things about this. One is, people like to poke fun at FIFA for opening up the trough and inviting everybody to eat out of it. But at the same time, they have gotten some praise, and I think rightly so, for being willing to say, no, we're not going to sit on this reserve forever. We're actually going to spend it. That said, if there's a professional women's league in Trinidad and Tobago in a couple months with Jack Warner as the commissioner, I won't be surprised.
Yeah, there you go. There is corruption. There is widespread corruption. I think I don't know if a lot of people who are not in the United States, who aren't kind of connected to soccer or don't know a lot about soccer, realize how corrupt some of these organizations are in different countries, and how a lot of the money goes to line pockets of, the FIFA corruption trials and what happened to Sepp Blatter, et cetera, kind of show, put a spotlight on the deep corruption in corners of FIFA and their member organizations. But I don't think that a lot of people in the United States realize how I don't want to say widespread, because it's probably not widespread, but a lot of times when money is given to places by FIFA, it doesn't go to where it is supposed to go. Let's just say that. I guess
sure. We could fix that, Annie, by letting the players make money off their name, image, and likeness. Oh, excuse me, that's the wrong, corrupt, insane, bonkers sport governing body that you and I both have to deal with. I shouldn't call the NCAA corrupt. That's a little much. But they are insane and bonkers and too much to deal with, and you and I go back and forth between the two from time to time.
Right. A lot of the knock that FIFA gets, I think, is not FIFA's fault necessarily.
Well, they could be a little more stringent about a lot of
this. Yeah, I believe that they could, like we talk about the situation in Iran and how women are not allowed into football stadiums, and how FIFA has believed them when they said, oh yes, women will be allowed into stadiums, and then we all act shocked when Iran actually doesn't let women into their stadiums. So, but I think FIFA's responsibility there is to say, okay, no more games there, but they won't do that. So, that is a common theme with FIFA. It's like, well, what is the punishment when corruption is present?
Pocket change, usually. Yeah. Kevin, if you're there.
Yes, I am.
I realize I have a question for you, and it might be a little more Dwayne's expertise and connections. I know, but let me know what perhaps you've heard about, there's been a lot of talk about the Canadian Premier League potentially having a women's league someday. A lot of people want it, obviously. I'm sure that in the abstract, the CPL would like to have it. Do you think that this puts a roadblock out there at all?
That's a good question. I know that the CPL does in the future want to be involved, and they always recognize that it was a need in Canada, but that's a good question if it's an actual roadblock. I think in a way that if you don't have a solution in the meantime, maybe it should happen. And if NWSL team is either going to show up in Toronto, like it's been rumored, or in BC, like we've been talking about for years, what better way to end Christine Sinclair's career than maybe start a team in Vancouver? It's just an idea. But yeah, I don't think
I'm sorry. As somebody who covers the Portland Thorns, you cannot have Christine Sinclair.
Hey, we gave you Sydney Leroux. We can keep Sinclair playing in Canada for a bit, okay?
That Kevin, you walked into that one. And I should have seen it coming, and I didn't. Because Christine Sinclair, of course, played collegiately in Portland and has lived there
for a long
time.
As people who know me know that I'm a huge Christine Sinclair fan. I'm just going to go ahead and blow away all that. I'm supposed to remain, unbiased, because I am so biased whenever I cover Christine Sinclair.
I have a lot of respect for Christine as well. And Kevin and I and Dwayne have discussed this on various sports podcasting network shows a number of times over the years. My respect for Sinclair is that she has the, for lack of a better phrase, he doesn't give a damnness that the U.S. players have to go out there and win at all costs, that the rest of the Canadian team sometimes is found lacking of. But we have trod upon that ground often enough on this show over time, I believe. And let's close with this. How are you passing the time while we wait for anything more than television documentaries to be live in terms of sports?
Let me tell you a quick Christine Sinclair story, my favorite Christine Sinclair story. I covered the Women's World Cup in 2015 in Canada, which, might as well have been the Christine Sinclair show for Canada. And I think I was in Canada for 38 days straight, because I covered the U.S. women's training camp in Winnipeg before the start of the tournament. And it was hard because I missed my kids, and that was difficult. The kids were still young at that point. So I did the tournament. I did 38 straight days writing about women's soccer. I saw match after match after match. And as you know from watching me work at various World Cups, I'm not just covering the U.S. women's team. I'm also covering all the other teams and writing game stories off closed circuit feeds of the games that I can't be at personally. So the World Cup is a really, really busy time for me. It's 20-hour days usually for a long period of time with no break. So at the end of it, I called my family, and I was going to land in Portland at about 4:00 in the afternoon. And I said, hey, listen, I don't want to talk about soccer. I don't want to see soccer. I don't want to have anything to do with soccer for at least the next month. So why don't, and my second request is I really want good Mexican food. Yeah. So, because it doesn't, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't exist in Canada. So
that's fair. That's fair.
So I get home and I throw my bags down and jump in the car with the family, and we're going to the neighborhood Mexican restaurant, a great little place called Raúl's. And I walk in, and who's sitting in the first booth but Christine Sinclair? And I'm like, and I just look at her like, holy cow, I can't get away from this. I'm just like, I can't even escape this in my own neighborhood. So that's my favorite Christine Sinclair story. But how am I getting through this? I am busier than I have ever. Like, normally this time of year would be super busy for me because in addition to the NWSL season starting over the weekend, the NBA playoffs would have started this weekend too. And I cover the Portland Trail Blazers as part of my job here in Portland. So I would have been super, super busy this weekend. But amazingly, I am like, and I'm very lucky to have a job. I just want to say that at the forefront, because a lot of people are losing their jobs, or a lot of people are getting furloughed. But during this time where I don't have to cover games, I've been able to work on projects, and some of them I'm really super excited about, and it's nice to be able to have this time to really talk to people. I don't know if people know what the AP is, but a lot of what I do is game stories. That's kind of our bread and butter. We're the wire service of record. Wherever there's a game, we are there and we write a report about it. Which means that's how I spend a great deal of my time. And when I do work on enterprise stories, a lot of times it's in that context, like I'm getting ready to go to another game, or I have, 4 games this week, and so I only have 1 day to work on enterprise. So it's really nice to be able to work on features and to actually talk to people rather than just getting on the phone with them, getting the quotes I need, and then getting off. I had a great conversation with Meghan Klingenberg recently that, touched on all kinds of different topics, and she gave me great ideas for future stories. And so that's kind of refreshing to be able to have that time to actually write. And I did a big story last week on how women's sports overall, not just including soccer, but overall, are going to be impacted by coronavirus. And so I talked to people from softball and volleyball and tennis and golf, and it was very nice to be able to kind of take a deeper dive into that subject than I would have been able to otherwise.
That is all really great stuff. I wish that any of it had run in our paper over here, but I shouldn't say that too loud because I'll get in trouble if I do, won't I?
It's still there. You can still put it out. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there.
And it is great to talk to you. Thank you so much for doing this, and be well, you and your family too. Out there. And one of these days we will cross paths again somehow, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
For Anne Peterson of the Associated Press, and who is out in Portland, Oregon, and our producer Kevin Laramie in Montreal, this is Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network.